Great. So jumping right in, since you are canvassing for Mamdani, what are you hearing? Like, what's the feedback been like?
Yeah.
Most people on board. I know you're over in Brooklyn, so a stronghold for him. But what's kind of the vibe?
Yeah, well, first of all, the energy of the people going out to canvas. I mean, a lot of the people who are showing up. Maybe it's their first time or one of their first few times that they have gotten, very involved in local politics. So just right off the bat, it is exciting to see people who otherwise maybe would not have got involved out there to knock doors, which is not the easiest thing, especially when you've never done it, to just talk to a stranger at a door. At the
What's the
doors, I mean,
volunteers actually? What are the people who are answering the doors saying?
so on the doors, people have obviously like heard about Zohran, and what's interesting about this canvas, for example, is that you have both Alexa Vilez, council member running for re-election, and Zohran together. So people, really know, their co-local council member here, just because she's been very vocal, very present, and they know Zohran, and the reception has been, pretty well. Sometimes it's even like too easy. Sometimes knocking doors for Zohran. Um, when we had got some more conversations in from the people I've been speaking to, definitely the affordability message has resonated and cut through so much.
And I guess, do you think that, like, obviously Eric Adams and Cuomo have been on Fox News often and sort of conservative media really hammering Mamdani on the idea that a lot of what he's saying he will do, he doesn't have the authority to do, or he doesn't have the support to do? Is that sort of attack resonating? Are people kind of, they don't really care because they just want to try something new? And whether, it's Eric Adams not doing certain things or Mamdani maybe not doing what he says he could do, they'd rather try to sort of shake things up. How's that been?
Yeah. I think that when you're most of your campaign is spent saying that the other person cannot achieve their vision, you're already losing. We are at a huge deficit of hope right now. And Zohran has tapped in to a sentiment and a feeling that something can and must be done to really shift the way things are going. The status quo is not only is not working, I mean, it is increasingly untenable to live in the city, and that's what we have seen so many people move out of New York City. And a bold vision, there's always going to be naysayers. Anything in politics, I mean, ultimately, politics is about ideas and bold ideas and trying to implement it to make people's lives better. And Zohran was one of the few people to put out a vision and a plan to achieve it. And for example, things like raising taxes on the ultra wealthy. He
Right.
can't do it as mayor, but the mayor plays a critical role in legislation, in going to Albany, right, and working with the state legislature.
And
The
so
you
I
know the
guess just
gov-
on that point, that's a good one to bring up.
yeah,
He would need kind of the state's support to do that, obviously, for the benefit of New York City. And I think there's a great argument to make that New York City is a pretty important part of New York State. But what's kind of, I mean, you work in politics and you work for a representative. Like, what kind of momentum is needed? What's the sell? Like, what's the pathway to actually get
yeah,
some of that stuff done? And I
yeah.
think, like, adding to that, the idea that obviously I know Hochul came out and endorsed him, but kind of did it in this way of like, I endorse him because we both hate Trump, but I disagree with him still on pretty much
Yeah.
everything. Do you see that as like a roadblock, or is it kind of something that they'll just have to work on when he's in office?
Getting anything done in a legislature, it takes a lot of advocacy, any policy, right? And the larger the movement, the larger the amount of people that support something, the more likelihood that
Mhm.
legislation on that issue gets passed. There are few more uh, openly obvious and huge way of supporting a policy than electing a mayor of New York City that is laser focused on several key objectives. So the fact that Zohan won because the voters voted for him on this agenda that he was going to push to raise tax on the rich, but also he's going to make it more affordable, right? He's going to make sure to freeze the rent on rent stabilized units. He's going to fight for fast and free buses. Really, at the core, childcare is also a huge issue, which can be done at the city council level, but also needs at the state level, right? These are all, and these things are possible. These are achievable. It's been done in other states. So the fact that he has a mandate from millions of people, a city of 8 million people. So him going and
Yeah.
telling the governor and the state legislature that they're supporting the city to do this, these policies, that carries a tremendous amount of weight and a tremendous
And
amount
in
of
terms
power.
of like a mandate, I guess like, one of the criticisms of him after the primary, which I think maybe was a little silly, but I think now that we're closer to the general is maybe more reflective, is that is it a mandate to win a Democratic primary? But then in the general, you are going to have millions more people involved who maybe don't support the agenda. And I guess then with that in mind, his own base I've seen online on TikTok and stuff. You talk about momentum. I think he did have a lot of momentum coming into the primary. And I think he's very smartly trying to go to a little bit more the moderate. What can we do? How can we work together as a city? He apologized to the NYPD over recent tweets. And I know some of his supporters took issue with that. He kind of disavowed the national DSA platform, and folks took issue with that. He said things like, he would discourage the use of the phrase globalize the intifada, a couple of issues that have sort of riled up, I think, some of his strongest supporters. Does he need that base to stay intact, or is he kind of building a different coalition as this campaign develops?
I think that Zoran, ran with a big vision, right? And he has been involved in, progressive activism and politics for a while. And he is showing the way that he's acting in the general election that he really does believe in that politics of addition. Let's not forget that when he first launched his campaign for a mayor in the primary, he went out and one of his first viral videos was speaking to Trump supporters, to Trump voters,
Mhm.
and said, "Why did you vote for Trump? And what do you care about? What would make your life better?" And something that was like a resounding message was the affordability piece and the
Right.
trust piece, right? That so many wouldn't trust that Democrats would actually get these things done. So I think he ran his primary opening the door for everyone, right? That this is where you don't have to agree with him on every issue. Um,
Sure.
and then in general, he's understanding that the electorate is obviously very broad and continues to speak to people that are going to be important for governing. And I think he's thinking about governing because these ideas need to be enacted in coalition,
Mhm.
and it is for the best interest of all New Yorkers for childcare to be affordable. People are leaving New York City. We're
And
losing them to other states.
I
So
think
he's
that's
going to need
true
the
on the
support.
affordability piece, particularly. And you mentioned sort of him going viral for interviewing those Trump supporters. And I remember, right after the primary too, kind of talking about some of these Trump supporters that just in 2024 voted for Trump and voted for Mamdani or were supporting him in that sort of short window. And I do think one of the interesting phenomenons we've seen, Trump had gains with young voters, he had gains with Latino voters, but a lot of those gains, especially with young voters, even just less than a year in, have sort of plummeted by double digits, major drops for Trump. And I think a big part of it is he promised these huge things that he then didn't deliver on. He promised to, stop all these wars. He didn't do that. He promised to, focus on grocery prices. He hasn't done that. And so does Mamdani then run the same risk of overpromising these things? And then we sort of chatted about all the barriers to getting them done and kind of making all these people that are super excited right now kind of disengaged and jaded yet again, or kind of what's the
Yeah.
risk there?
Well, people are waking up to the reality on all sides of the spectrum, and even Trump's own base, that Trump's a fake populist. It's fake populism. They thought that he was going to deal with the affordability of grocery prices. Grocery prices are the highest they've ever been. The tariffs are killing small businesses, and small businesses have been having to
Meanwhile,
raise
he's
their
doubled his own
prices.
wealth. So
It the crypto, I mean, he's enriching himself with his crypto coins that he's launched. It's a grift, and people are starting to realize that their lives are not getting better. And I mean, and even look at the Epstein files. I think that is, such an example of the ultra powerful protecting the ultra rich and powerful. And Trump has shown that he wasn't in fact, trying to hold the elites accountable. He not
Mhm.
only is one of them, he is protecting them. And also how his base has turned him on Israel as his, unconditional support of Netanyahu and what he's doing. And people are just waking up
Sure.
to the reality that, Trump isn't making life domestically
Well, and
better.
I guess the question is though, right? Like, regardless of all the talking points and Epstein and all these things, at the end of the day, folks are going into the grocery store and the prices aren't lower. That's
Exactly.
what they're judging by.
And he
So
promised
if
that.
for right, and for Mamdani, same argument, right? If he can't get, you know, the
Yeah.
state to raise taxes on the rich, and he can't then do a lot of his agenda, and folks walk into the grocery stores or they go about their lives and things haven't become more affordable, what's the story they're going
Yeah.
to be? It's worth a shot. We sort of
Yeah.
believed in the ideas. And then I
Gotcha.
guess like
Mhm.
the second piece of that is I know you guys were pretty early to endorse in the Democratic primary, the Brooklyn Young Dems. Um, is there an argument that a different candidate, whether it would be a Brad Lander or, I remember from last cycle, Catherine Garcia, somebody that is ambitious, is progressive, but maybe has a little bit more of a realistic pitch and take of
Mhm.
what could be done in the city should have been the person? Will people say that in hindsight if
Mhm.
Mamdani's not successful?
Well, I hope, for example, Brad Lander is part of a Zoran administration. I think Zoran met the moment, and ultimately the status quo is not working.